Adam Bornstein, thank you so much for coming to the first hour.
KELSEYHEENAN, thank you for having me on the first hour.
Absolutely. I've known you for many years-ish now.
Many years now.
Yeah.
I lose track of time.
Me too.
Yeah.
I first learned about you as a writer and a fitness nutrition person. And then I learned so much more. You are quite an enigma. The more I get to know you, the more I realize you do so many things.
I like to, hang out behind the scenes. The guy behind the human, the person, the man, the woman. And yes, I would say it's funny. Like people are like, what does your husband do? And she's like now sometimes just be like drug dealer because it's easier to just say that than try and explain the different jobs or companies.
Yeah, because you have multiple things. And one of the kind of, I don't know what you call it, a catchphrase on your site is, you may not know my name, but you've definitely read my work.
Yes, accurate.
Yes, and it's true. You've been a writer, you've been a New York Times bestselling author, you've written for many publications, you've written your own books, which I'm excited to dive into as well. And you also ghostwrite. You also have a media company.
Yes.
You also do what else?
I think you covered it. So I was in traditional media for a while. So I was the guy behind making sure you read everything for many years in Men's Health, and then many years after that on livestrong.com. And then I went out on my own, but then I consulted with pretty much every media company you can imagine, both inside and out of fitness. And then I worked with big brands like the Microsofts and Dollar Shave Clubs of the world. And I worked with individuals, whether it was like Tim Ferriss or Reid Hoffman or LeBron or Arnold Schwarzenegger. So I like to tell stories is the best way to put it. And here's a great story. Who would ring the doorbell during a podcast?
Who would ever?
I want it to be like a guest surprise.
Oh my gosh, wouldn't that be great?
I want a musical artist to drop in.
Who would you like to drop
and
in?
Today, right now. No Taylor Swift joining us on the first hour today?
T-Swift. I love that that's the choice.
Why not? I mean, she's a force of nature.
She is. She's incredible. The first time I heard about her was my senior year of high school when she was doing the country stuff. Yeah. And now look at her.
She's a force of nature.
She is.
So I was like, I'm thinking, whenever you do a podcast, you want episodes to be big. And I'm like, I'm confident in myself. But if a guest appearance from Taylor Swift came in, I feel pretty confident that a lot of people would be like, what? Not today, though. Not today.
Next time.
We'll
make it happen.
I'm going to make sure, now that I have this planted in my head, I need Taylor Swift to drop in on a podcast. All right, that's all right. I like ambitious goals.
That's definitely a way to put it.
Yeah.
So you have done all these, you went from being a researcher. Is that how you started your career?
Yeah, researcher at the university level. I loved research. I loved science. What I realized more was I loved telling stories and turning the science into something that could be usable and applicable. And I think like one day I truly had this revelation. I remember the moment. I worked in two different labs. One was on the exercise science side, and then one was in social psychology. Love psychology. And we developed this video game where you would play a video game, and we were checking people's reaction times, and we were seeing how essentially social stigmas of skin color affect decision making. So it was a video game where you would shoot or not shoot someone. It was supposed to be dependent on what they were holding in their hand, whether it was a gun or like a Coke can or a wallet. And people had 750 milliseconds to make a decision. And you had a button box, and it's shoot or not shoot, gamified. And you do this, but then people would be different skin color, black, white, so on and so forth. And what you found is that the skin color, not the object, truly influenced decision making. So it was this big finding. I remember the lead researcher, Josh Carell, ended up going to like all these TV shows. And remember when you're sitting there and you're in a lab and you're kind of crunching numbers and looking at everything and writing the discussion, and everyone's like all pumped up, like they just like won the championship. They're high-fiving, they're excited, and I'm sitting there and I'm watching this and I'm experiencing none of that. And I'm in my early 20s, and this is like a big deal. This is a huge breakthrough in a study that's ended up being the first of many, many studies. And I'm just like a a lowly researcher that's been attached to this project, but gets to be a part of what ended up being very, very cool research. And it was that moment where I'm like, if I'm not having a strong reaction to this, something really exciting, what's it going to be like 10 years from now, 20 years from now, when like you're grinding and like if the highs aren't even giving you a high, right? Like no work is easy. It all has lows. But if the high isn't giving you a high, I was like, maybe I'm doing the wrong thing. And it made me stop and pause and reflect on what I wanted to do, and ended up going and completely changing, my career direction away from just like academia and more towards telling stories. It took me a while to figure out that I wanted to tell stories about fitness. And it took me even longer to realize that I could write books and market and brand. It took me longer to figure out you could turn products or services. All those were different like moments where you realize the potential of what you can do if you can tell a great story and communicate people and strike a chord with people to the point that they want to buy or share or tell others. But I think that moment of like, you're doing academics, you want to be a scientist or a researcher, versus what I ended up doing, all started with that moment of, this great breakthrough of really cool research. And I was like, I feel nothing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did any part of you want to dig deeper into that story of like why and tell that story?
Yeah. So, it ended up like I was able to do a spin-off of my own research where I was like curious, like, well, is there a way to manipulate this bias? Because I ended up working, it wasn't an immediate reaction. I had that thought of I should be doing something else, but like anything else, it takes a while to make the leap, to change your decision. So I ended up working in that lab for like another year probably before I changed. It wasn't like I had it and then like the next day I'm gone. And then when I finally made the decision, everything was like very shotgun. I realized I wanted to become a writer, and I went on this other journey of like what I thought it meant to be a writer, because I had no idea.
Right.
I had done writing as like a freelance thing to make money, as like a hobby, but I didn't think that through in the same way that I started training people when I was 18, 19 years old was the first time I got certified. I didn't realize I could do for a living, or everyone's like, no one's a trainer. What are you going to train people?
Right.
Who train? Get a real job. I'm like, okay. I like fitness. I'll just dip my toes. Fun side hustle before side hustles. But I was very, very curious about like, okay, you see what was coined the shooter bias, which is that like irrespective of object, when you really shrunk that. So 750 milliseconds is not a lot of time. So you can't actually process. You were just relying on kind of like thoughts that are working on the subconscious level in order for you to make a decision. If people were more likely to shoot someone of dark skin color than of light skin color. But I was like, is there a way that you can manipulate this that might play on like societal thoughts? So what I wanted to do was have people play the exact same video game, but then listen to music. So I spent all these months essentially testing music of what was stereotypically either white or black music, or stereotypically violent or non-violent. So it was like a 2x2 condition design. So you had like, your non-violent like white music would have been like, I'm trying to think what it was like a Frank Sinatra type, just like very, very typical. And again, this is like you bring in hundreds of people, they listen to music and they rate it. So part one is like, can you figure out how people would stereotypically categorize that type of music? And then once you have those 4 categories, you then have them play the game and listen. And you really didn't see an impact if you're listening to the death metal or the Frank Sinatra or like the traditional like R&B soul music. But then when you got into the, in quotes, the violent black condition, violent dark skin, which was going to be like gangster rap. Right. So we're like talking back to like the Eazy-E, Tupac of like the 90s, like just referring to a lot of like death and killing people. And they listen to that music. The shooter bias went away. They shot everyone just as fast.
Whoa.
Yeah. And that was like another where I was like, oh, this is super interesting. But like it was like interesting, but it wasn't doing anything for me. Like, what am I going to do with this? What am I doing with my life? And I remember I stayed in that lab and we tested the shooter bias on like a police academy to see if it existed, and even existed in the police academy. Wow. And the research was fantastic. And Josh Carell, and at the time I think it was Chick Judd and Bernadette Park, the lead researchers, they took this research in a million different directions. Brilliant people, far smarter than me at that. And it's like, there were a couple things that were happening for me. One, I just wasn't getting that same reaction that to me I wanted. And then there was something that happened where, you look at the people you work with at some point, and you don't have to be on their level. And oftentimes you're not, right? Like, we're all work in progress. But you look at it and you're like, can I be that, or can I surpass it? And I thought I could be a good researcher, good in psychology, good in academia. I really didn't believe that I could be great. And that bothered me.
Why is that?
Whether it was the passion or the interest, like, so much was like, at some point we all go on this journey, and like, we either choose it, or it's just like it chooses you, or you do it because it's like what you think is the right thing. For me, like, the right thing was, like, I was always a really good student. You go and you study hard, and then you go to grad school and you accumulate these degrees, and then you like go on and do something. And I was on a safe track. It wasn't my track. And there was just something within me that was like, I could be good at this, but I can't be great. And most people thought, I remember telling people at the time, was it crazy? Because I was in my early 20s and I had like a job at the University of Colorado, a major university, doing research, doing all this stuff. And on paper, it's like, oh, like, what a great job, what a great opportunity. And to me, it was just like, it didn't speak to me, it didn't excite me, and I truly didn't think I could be great. And I don't know if it was their curiosity in the space, or their intellect, or how good they were at statistics, and I was not. It was something that I was just like, I could be good at this, and it kind of comes easy to me. But I don't think I could be great at it. And I wanted to do something where I could be great. And I thought I could be a great writer, no matter what I was writing. And I'm like, I can be a great writer. I don't know what that means. I don't know what it's going to take. I just know that when I am writing, when I am telling stories, it doesn't matter what I'm writing about, it really fills me up. It really challenges me. It actually doesn't come easy. But because it doesn't come easy, I'm willing to work really hard on it. When I work really hard and I get done, like molding that clay, it's fantastic. And I want to do that. I want to do that. And then I set out to become a writer. And I could have never told you, looking back, however many years now. Oh, man, I'm getting too old. Like 20 years ago. That this is where it would end up. No chance. I truly thought at the time I'd be a sports writer. Okay. And I remember having this talk with my parents because they thought I was nuts. My parents were always so supportive, but also very blunt. And they're like, you're going to be a writer? You're going to write sports? And I was like, yeah, I don't care if, this is my line, I don't care if I'm in North Dakota covering high school sports. I'll be happy.
I love it.
And that's what I want. And like, yeah. And my older brother, who's brilliant, was like, yeah, you're going to be happy and super poor. And I was like, yeah, probably. I never thought in my life truly that I was going to make a lot of money, but I'll never forget, like, when I was trying to decide whether I wanted to make this jump, go off the safe track, over the proven track where I've got these like amazing researchers who are behind me and give me tremendous opportunities. And it was really fortunate. I wrote to all of these sports writers, just wanted to meet with them, right? I emailed people, I cold emailed, right? I just wanted to talk to people, and no one would meet with me. And there was one sports writer by the name of Neil Welk, who at the time wrote the column, or covered like the Colorado Buffaloes, my favorite university and team, and where I went to school. And he agreed to meet with me. Wow. And he met with me in Boulder at a coffee shop, and I asked him about this, and towards the end of the conversation, I'll never forget, he was like, have I made a lot of money? He's like, no. Do I maybe wish sometimes I made more money? Yeah. But he's like, I went to X number of Olympics, I've been to X number of Super Bowls, I've been to the college football national championship game, I've met so many people, and he's like, man, have I had a fun life. And I was like, sold.
Done.
I'm in. Like, that's like, to me, it's always been about that. Like, my greatest fear is always about like not being happy and not making the most of my time since I was a teenager. I'm a big journaler, and I always had this fear. I had this fear of life passing me by, and life passed me by because I wasn't living it on my terms and not being happy. And that was the thing that would keep me up at night. And I just wanted to chase happiness, because there was a difference for me from like doing what you're good at to like doing what like truly makes you happy. And then because you're happy, you see that you can become great at it. And that was the moment after that conversation where I was like, all right, I'm going all in. Because at that point when I met, I tried applying for all these jobs and I had been writing, but everyone rejected me. So I got rejections from like 30 plus places, and I was like looking everywhere for a job. No one wanted to hire me. So then I thought the logical thing is if no one's going to hire me, like I should get a degree. I'll show them that's what I need. I need a degree.
Another piece of paper.
Yes, I need to go to graduate school to get my journalism degree. That seems right. So that's what I did. But at the time I was like, there are deadlines, and it's like, and I'm like, oh man, I've got to like take the GRE like right now because the deadline to apply it was something like in a couple weeks. So I remember 8 days to study for the GRE.
How'd that go?
8 days. The math score came back that like I shouldn't know how to add or subtract. It was just like you cannot do math. And the verbal score came back probably very low for a native speaking person of this country. And then my writing score was in the 99th percentile.
Wow.
And I remember again talking to my parents and friends. They're like, you should at least probably get the verbal up, right? I sat there and I'm like, all right, so math is like, wow, I didn't even think I was that bad. I thought I was good with numbers. Verbal was like, okay, so maybe I don't have the biggest words. But I was like, if my job is to write, and you gave me a prompt, right? Because these are like the GREs are like, you gave me a writing prompt, and I just had to write, and these people rated that writing. And they told me that I'm better than 99% of the people who write, even though that apparently I don't know the English language and can't add numbers. Isn't that the job? And I was like, let's roll with it. And then the ego in me, I applied to like the 5 best graduate schools, found a rankings list, and I'm going top 5.
I love it.
Going for all of them. And I got rejected from 2 of them, waitlisted on 1 of them, and into 2 of them.
Wow.
And I ended up going to the University of Florida, and that's kind of like where the writing mission really began.
So with you're a writer, you got into school. How did you get into fitness writing?
It's funny. So as I mentioned, like when I was like 18, 19 years old. So when I was a teenager, I broke my back twice. And the second time I broke my back, the future that was laid out for me was pretty bleak. So I fractured L3, L4. I had 2 bulging discs. I had stenosis in my spine, and all this just means that like your back is pretty fucked up. Yeah, it's pretty bad. I was in a lot of pain. I had terrible sciatica. Like the story goes, like I woke up one day and I like truly couldn't feel my legs. I'm in high school and I'm like freaking out. And I've been through this once before, but the first break wasn't as bad. It was a part stress fracture. It was painful, but this is like early 90s, and the approach then was like, go get massage therapy. I got massage therapy for 6 months, and they like patch you up, and they're like, there you go, you're good to go. And I played a lot of sports back in high school, and I just had a lot of back pain. And my doctor's approach at that time was like, here are some muscle relaxants and some anti-inflammatories. So it's like you're just popping pills, masking the pain, struggling, trying to play sports, in a ton of pain, and like one day you wake up and like you're just like your legs almost feel numb because the pain is so bad. I'll never forget going in. They're gonna go do a bone scan. They shoot dye into you, and I remember like in the gown, they're like kind of forecasting things, and they're worried that I've like broke my back again. And I remember like trying to, because like when you imagine broken back, it's like you think you can't move, but depending on where the fracture is, like you can. And I remember like trying to touch my toes and like bending over, and it hurts. So I'm like, I had a broken back. I'm not touching my toes. I remember it was the first time. I remember getting those bone scan, getting the MRI, and like being told that I had 2 fractures. And they showed me the discs, and just being so disheartened. And the doctor just being like, one more shot to the back and we don't know what can happen. And that's like intimidating, but it's also like, you're like 16, 17 years old. Right. And you're like, you're basically telling me I got to be sedentary for the rest of my life. And luckily, my parents were just kind of like, no, screw that. We got to find a better doctor. Right. And they found this guy by the name of Dr. Schaefer, who was the orthopedic doctor for all the Chicago sports teams. I grew up in Chicago. So the Bulls, the Blackhawks, the Bears, the Cubs, like he was the guy. And I go there and he's like, yeah, this doesn't look good. This is not good, but like we can build you up, but it's going to be work. This ain't no more massage therapy. Like you are training. And I'm like, what does that mean? He's like, you got to build, we were talking about the pillar and the core. And like, it's crazy looking back now. And this was so long ago. It was like 30 years ago. The type of training is what you would see a lot of is like single leg, like glute bridges and just like a lot of like mobility stuff. And he's like, we have to build up your pillar. And until you can pass these battery of tests, you're not allowed to go back to activity. And it was truly like, it was PT twice a day. It was work.
Wow.
And I became fascinated in the human body and the capacity of what you can do in nutrition and fitness. And I got a training certification, and I got one in nutrition as well. I remember very early being involved in like the PN certification. And you know, you start accumulating all this, and you start training people just like on the side. You start training your friends,
Sure.
and then you get your first job at a gym, and you do this. But to me, that was just, it was a hobby. It never truly entered my mind. In school, I ended up adding like exercise phys and doing that, and on top of psychology, because it was such a passion. But I never thought I'd do anything. I just loved it. Insatiable appetite to learn and read and do and job shadow. I just wanted to learn from people. I remember during the summers, I would go and I would job shadow like great trainers. Like, it was before social media. There was no social media.
Right.
You're just trying to find people and learn from them. And it wasn't until I got to the University of Florida. And when I went to the University of Florida, part of the reason I chose there was a professor by the name of Ted Spiker. And Ted Spiker was kind of doing what I wanted to do. He was teaching because I always thought that I wanted to teach because I love interacting with people. But he was a fitness editor previously at Men's Health. He'd written tons of books, New York Times bestselling books. So like, he was writing in magazines, he was writing books, he was teaching kids. And I was like, that guy. I went to grad school being like, Ted Spiker's going to be my best friend, whether he wants to or not. And I remember getting there on like the first day and just truly like hunting him down. And Ted Spiker wasn't teaching any grad school classes.
Okay.
He was purely undergrad. And I asked to meet with him, and he meets. He's like, you're a grad student? I'm like, yeah, I know. And I'm like, it was like Ron Burgundy. I want to be you. Not on you. I want to be you. And excuse me, it's just like, I want to know what you did, how you did it, so I can like recreate it for myself. So we struck up this friendship, and I would meet with Spiker and just learn from him and like what I need to do to get better. And in one of our meetings, I remember, because then we started playing basketball. He allowed me play with like all the professors. I was about to call them the old professors. He would kill me if I said it. But at the time, they all felt really old to me. I was still in my mid-20s.
I love it.
It was restarting, and we would go Sunday nights, and we would ball. And I loved it because it was probably because I was younger, but I was so much faster than all of them, and they would just get really angry. It's great. It's like my dreams of always going back and like playing basketball with like my sons like in like middle school and like being like, I would dominate this level. And my wife's like, yeah, really impressive for a 40-year-old man to beat a bunch of 7-year-olds. And I'm like, yeah, but like imagine me on the football field. Put me at middle linebacker. I'd destroy these kids. What's wrong with me?
But you could.
I could do it. So we would like play, and like one day he's like, Adam, I'm just thinking about this. You tell me all this time about like being a sports writer and you want to go and do this, but I'm a little confused. He's like, you have this really strong background in exercise physiology. You worked in an exercise science lab. You've trained people. You've got nutrition certifications, and you love writing. Why don't you want to be like a health writer?
Yeah.
And now it seems like so obvious, but I sat there and I was like,
Light bulb moment.
health writer. What a great idea.
Yes.
I don't have to go and cover high school sports. Health writer, yes. And it was such a, right? Like, at that time, it was just like, you create buckets for yourself, or you think where you belong or what you should be doing. And I love sports and I loved writing. And I just thought like that was like the writing calling. But when I truly looked at my passions, what I really loved, right? And that obsession with fitness only grew over the years, right? Because as you start like building your body and learning more and coming back and bouncing back from a broken back. And like after the broken back, I was like a tiny guy, right? Like you understand, like by even like in college, sophomore year of college, I remember because I started like charting things. I was 5'8", 130 pounds. Yeah. Was a slight human being. Yeah. There was very little muscle mass on that. That wasn't like a lean and shredded 100. That was like that is a small male.
Yes.
And then you start like, you remember you like add the first 5 pounds and the first 10 pounds, and you start like banging out pull-ups, and it's just like, it's very empowering, right? I've always said, like, I don't care what your goal is in fitness, but the ability to know that you can take the responsibility to change your body makes you feel that you can take the responsibility to change and do almost anything else. Because it can be really, really hard. And it was really, really hard. And it was just like the work and the dedication. And it was such an eye-opening thing of, wow, I truly am passionate about this. I truly love this. I feel like I could research and talk and would want to be immersed in that. And right, sometimes there's no shame in realizing that you don't have to be the one that comes up with the idea. Like repeatedly in my life, I have relied upon so many wonderful people who have helped show me the way or helped me along the way. And I'm incredibly grateful. I'm incredibly grateful for Ted Spiker because, you know, he took a chance on the annoying kid who wouldn't like leave him alone and really helped me. And has continued to help me throughout time. I remember when I got a job at Men's Health, like his words helped so much where he's like, he told me, you're going to get in there and you're kind of going to suck. I'm like, man, they hired me. And he's like, no, you're going to get those edits back and it's going to look like a bloodbath and you're going to question yourself. And the moment that happens, he's like, I just want you to know you belong. This is just a roadmap of like, they're showing you where you are and they're showing you where you need to get to. And I remember getting edited and it truly was like, this is like back in the day, like people would like print stuff out and would like write and it would like come back and it was an ink bloodbath. And I had his voice in the back of my head because I watched people there truly like who would cry because like the editing was pretty ruthless. Yeah. I learned to become a great editor by having a great writer and editor by having amazing editors who really pushed you. It was like a coach who like sees what you can become, but it was not easy. It's not easy to like put your heart into something and someone to like shit all over it and be like, go back, do it better, but acting almost like, it's not that they act like you didn't belong, but that's how you feel.
Right.
But I was so prepared for that it still hurt, but I was like, I don't know. Don't let that like little voice that creep into your head be like, you were warned. This is going to happen. Go make it better.
That's interesting because having good feedback like that makes you better. And if you're able to kind of differentiate, okay, this isn't a personal attack. This is trying to make my work better. And if you accept that, then you can become better for next time. But what is an example or what would that look like? You submit some of your first work at Men's Health. What are kind of these standards that you need to hit in an article?
Yeah, so it really depended on what you were doing, right? So this is, 2007, 2008, Men's Health. My direct editor was Adam Campbell, who was wildly talented. This guy could you would ask him things like, yeah, actually we covered that in like October 2016, page 64. And I was like, damn it. It was so good. How do you know all of these things? And it was ruthless, but it really depended. Like there was one section that used to be in the front of the book. That's the front part of it. That was like muscle bulletins. Muscle bulletin was all research based. So you had to have this like powerful lead that would pull people in and a research factoid. And then like it was service journalism. So you had to have something actionable. But Adam came from a research background too. And like sometimes I'd pull stuff and like, look at this cool study. And he's like, mechanism study, animal study. He's like, did we even really learn something? Like, so even getting the study approved, forget the takeaway. Like the threshold could be like, you would spend so much time just trying to find the items to get in there before you could even like write them. And then you would write them and you'd be like, this lead doesn't make any sense. This surface is terrible. You got to cut it by like 50% because these things were short. And then you'd finally get it done and you'd think like, okay, Adam Campbell approves of this now. It's great. And you go to page layout. So then you got to lay it out in like the space that you have in the magazine. And then you might have to cut a little bit more because like you only had that page. It's not like online where you had infinite. This is a time of magazines. You had that page and there was still design to go around it. And you think like, okay, we're great. But then you have to send it to the top editors over there, which was Peter Moore and Bill Phillips and Matt Marion and Bill Stieg. And then all of them are coming back and you might get 4 page proofs back and all of them have different notes. And some of them are things that you already had to change or like Adam might have asked you to change or like they want you to add more, but there's no space. And you'd be like, oh my goodness. So it's just like, it was a pounding of like, can you be concise? Is what you're saying making sense? Because the other thing was like, Adam is wildly talented, but Adam also comes from a fitness background. So sometimes me and him would see things and like, then you'd get people who didn't have a fitness background, just fantastic editors. Like, no, this still doesn't make sense. Or like the person who's really not into fitness won't get this. So it really challenged you to think about like how to communicate, how to say less, but still say more. And you do, and that was just for one page as time went on. Like, you're managing huge sections where you then have like other, like you had like the columnist parts, and you had the 15-minute workout, and then you had like the feature with the athlete or whatever it is, and then you have like the longer stuff, and then like, and all this was happening. Like, it's sad because I think magazines are like, for the most part, dead. Some still exist, but like the digital and video versions live on. But what an incredible breeding ground for a lot of talent, challenging your thoughts, telling great stories, and having to do it in different ways. It was a really, really hard job, but an incredibly rewarding job.
Has that helped you with like this book that you just wrote?
Invaluable.
Because being concise and to the point, and also being able to relate to whoever the reader is probably pretty important.
It's the most important thing. Like, rule number one that I learned from, I've got rules in my life and they come from different people, but like rule number one in life is don't be an asshole.
I love that.
Rule number one is don't be an asshole.
Yes.
Rule number two is don't be greedy, which a lot of people disagree with, but I think greed gets you in trouble. In writing, rule number one is know your audience. Most people want to write, or they want to communicate, or they want to create something, but it doesn't matter what content you're creating, video, audio, written. Know your audience. Understand who that person is that would be most obsessed with that thing, and you should be creating your content for that person. Because if you hit the bullseye, not only will they be obsessed with it, they will tell everyone about it. Right? And that's something, like, I was fortunate enough to work with Tim Ferriss for many years. Love him or hate him, Tim is a mastermind. He is brilliant. He's incredible at reaching people. Something I learned from Tim is that, like, Tim covers a wide variety of topics. And my job is to make his content go far and wide and reach people. So that means, like, you would think, oh, you got to appeal to a lot of people. And he was like, no. When you create content, you should be writing for the 5% of people who are most passionate about this. Forget everyone else. Like, who is that person? What are they consuming? What do they think about? What do they love? How do you then create it for them in a way that they become so obsessive of? Because if you do that well, they have other friends, or they might influence other people, and like, you want people to be so obsessed with your take or so interested in what you are talking about that they can't help consume and share. So you start stacking out, and like, I think too many people think about what they want to create, not necessarily who's consuming what they create.
So how do you identify what people want to consume? Like, is it obviously it's understanding who you're talking to, but in like your media company, if you're working with a company and helping them create strategies for the different elements of whatever they're creating, if it's a podcast or a business, how do you identify what that is?
Yeah. I mean, the easiest way, which takes work, is you work with those people. I'm a huge believer in the jobs to be done methodology, which is essentially like, you will do focus groups with people and talk with them, and you have to ask non-leading questions to figure out what purpose a product, piece of content, service, whatever it might be, what role you want it to fulfill. And there are other ways you can do surveys and things like that, but I truly think if you have an idea who the target consumer is, you need to interact with them directly. You need to be obsessed with that who the person. When I wrote this book, and something I've learned from any book, I allowed 500 people to work with me for free because I knew there was going to be some drop off. 500 people, I'm like, you're going to get free workouts, free nutrition, but I'm going to be sending you parts of this book. I'm going to be giving you the exact workout program, the exact nutrition program, the exact parameters, and I want your feedback. Because I've been in the position before where I've written things that I thought were great, and A, it ends up being confusing, or B, like, the programs either aren't practical, or you can't do them in the gym, or you're confused about this. Like, you need that real world feedback, and you have to be obsessed with the audience or consumer, whatever it is. And the only way to truly understand what they want, or sometimes more importantly, what they need, right? A lot of people don't know what they need. They think about what they want and they compare it to what they currently have. That always means that there's a gap. You need to talk to people. You need to interact with people. And you need to then be willing to test things out. Like anything else, you kind of have to figure out what works best. And, you know, trial and error is a real part of growth, and there's no shame in it. It's no different than training or nutrition. There are a lot of things that work. Mm-hmm. What works best for you is going to be partially determined by just trying some of these other things that could be effective. Sticking with it for long enough that you can separate signal from noise and knowing what actually moves the needle, and then doubling down on the things that work. So we spend a lot of time in trying to find that intersection where there's a lot of data available. So we try to find strike the middle ground between the quantitative and the qualitative. How can we do enough of the qualitative work of talking to the people, interacting with the people, listening to the people, getting to know them so well, and then mixed with data you could see in terms of like search trends and what people interact with on social media. And like there's so much data out there. And then like, where is that sweet spot about what people want to listen to or what people want to watch or where they're even consuming content, right? The age of people might influence, like, if you're trying to do a podcast that's targeted towards older people and everyone's doing video, but are like 50-year-olds really on YouTube? Not so much.
Right.
Doesn't mean you don't have video, but you have to surface that video in places that they would find it. So there's so many aspects of like, and that takes time, but I think that obsessiveness of who you want to serve helps a lot. Even with this, like I knew exactly the type of person that I wanted to work with. I wanted to work with the person who had struggled to lose weight, had lost some before, but had gained it back. They worked out, but had never figured out how to work out consistently. They're not going to be the person who's working out 6 days per week. They're not going to be the person who right now knows how to cook all of their meals at home. They want to eat takeout. They want to eat dessert, but they deserve to be healthier than they are now. Because I know that like where our health journeys take us is different for everyone. Some people get to a point that is far short of what they thought the goal was. And they're like, oh my goodness, I'm content, right? I work out 3 times a week. I'm strong. I feel good. I eat the foods that I love. I didn't need to be shredded. This is all that I wanted, right? Like people find their happiness almost accidentally because oftentimes like our goals are just based on what we see other people doing. Mm-hmm. Or there are people who just thought that that's what they want. And then once they go on their journey, once they start doing things, they're like, oh, wow, this is easier than I thought. Or I love this. Or like, man, I want to become even stronger. I want to build more muscle. I want to go run a triathlon, or I want to do whatever it is. I believe that like goals and visions are living, breathing things. And our job is to identify like what people want to achieve right now. What stands in their way? How do you remove that barrier? And how do you give them enough support and guidance to keep them going long enough that they can do it on their own because they build a habit? And the only way that you do that is if you understand, like, who are you truly trying to serve? Some people have read this book and they're like, I wish there was a lot more like detailed nitty gritty science. And like, there's like 100 studies in there, but like the detailed studies that they want are like, right, they're trying to lose the last percentage or 2 of body fat. And I'm like, that wasn't the goal of this. Mm-hmm. Do I think there are things in there for you, especially with the obsessive mindset and like how we punish ourselves for behaviors that are not perfect and how that's probably one of the reasons why you can't hit that next level? Definitely. But was this written specifically for you? No. You've probably mastered many of the things that I've already talked about. So if that doesn't describe you, that's great. I would argue that a lot of people just benefit by reading the chapter on like how to add takeout food to their life because food is amazing. And
yep.
I eat out all the time, but eating out is not easy if you're trying to be healthy. So like even navigating that can be difficult. And that was part of the mindset that I think it becomes a lot easier to create anything if you truly know who you're creating for, because then you just have an endless list of questions, problems, concerns, or even knowing what other people consume.
Yeah.
Allows you to understand what they might be hearing or watching or seeing or thinking about, or other habits that they might have that could be holding them back. So when you lay that out and you break down who this person is, and if you get it, like it clicks. There's we do. I work at the Arnold Schwarzenegger right now on a daily email. We know exactly who this Arnold's Pump Club.
Yep.
we know exactly who it is, where it's like, how do you write a daily email with 3 different tips every single day, breaking down science? I'm like, because we know exactly who it is. And I've got this document that like is a never ending list that I'm always adding new things that I see in the news, new studies, articles I'm reading, things on social media, whatever, where it's just like, because I know who this person is and I know what they're struggling with and I know what they're seeing and what they're probably thinking and where they're getting confused and what they need to hear in order to take action. So while it is a ton of work, I very much underestimated how much it would take to write a daily email. There is no shortage of topics. The issue is not like, what am I going to write today? It's how do you break it down? How do you find the time to read these studies, make sense of them, consolidate, combine it with the other items, and do it with everything else that you do in a day?
You do such a good job of being able to marry together the research, the science element, and also being able to tell stories in a way that people enjoy consuming it. and also being empathetic, understanding what people want and need, because that doesn't always go together. Sometimes research can be so confusing, and it can be intimidating, and it can feel like it's contradicting. And then there are people who shame you because you're not taking one piece of science in, you know what I mean? And, but you do such a great job of providing context, and here's what the research says, and here's how we apply it into our real lives. And for our audio listeners, the book is called You Can't Screw This Up. And I think this should be a prerequisite for every human being to have.
That's very kind of you.
Well, I do, because you do such a great job of breaking down the actual research and facts about nutrition, but make it realistic in how to apply it. And you also come in with an element of understanding the mental emotional aspects of nutrition, because that often gets left out as well. Right. And being able to understand that we are, emotional beings, and that's also an important part of food. And also just your whole focus on takeout and why eating takeout is going to happen, why it's important, and how you can work that into your life. I just feel like everyone should read this book. Everyone should follow everything that Adam does.
Listen to Kelsey.
I know what I'm talking about.
Who am I to challenge? It's her show. Listen to her. What she said.
But that's one of the reasons that I mean, every time we talk, I'm just like, Adam is, first of all, so cool. You're so smart, but you also are, you genuinely understand human psychology and the empathy that we need as people to function well. And so that's why I think this book is great. And also Arnold wrote the foreword.
Arnold did write the foreword.
Which is pretty amazing.
I mean, you can like read it and hear it in his voice in your head. And that alone, I mean, why not? Because Arnold's voice is iconic. But yeah, I think you point out a really important thing to me, that is, if we were lab rats and we were all like trapped in a metabolic chamber and we had to do thing, and someone's like forcing you to go ahead and do this, that's one thing. But we're not, right? We live in the real world where, even on our best days, stress and fatigue and cravings and desires play a big part in what we do and how we live. And if our plan is to think that we don't have any leeway, we have to be perfect, or we're going to screw it up, and then we have to catastrophize and punish ourselves, like, that's not what health is about. I think so many people walk around trying to follow a health plan, feeling stressed about it because they're always worried about the next meal, the next step, the next workout. What if I miss it? What if I have a little bit of sugar? And we act like our bodies are this frail thing. Like, our bodies are incredibly strong and resilient. If you think you can't have dessert, or if you so choose, have a drink every now and then, or get takeout, you're kidding yourself. You're truly kidding yourself. And if you think that you need to punish yourself, in order to either earn that or pay for that, you're also kidding yourself, right? The plans that the healthiest people in the world, what they know is that, like, part of their plan is to screw up. It's to allow these things that make them feel human so they can still perform and do the things that might be a little bit harder. I think most people think that it's just easy for anyone to eat healthier, to work out. It's not. We've just built the habits and routines, or we understand what happens if we don't do these things, or we have a deep enough why that we have some fear of what will like push us to go and do it. And a lot of the workouts, you've talked about, I talk about, are not great, right? But it's like a clock in, you do it, you get it done. And some days when you just feel so bad, you just don't do it, and it's okay, because the next day that you go, it's probably going to be 10 times better than it was. Or, if you would have forced, you would have got hurt, or something bad would have happened, which would have set you back. And those days that you try and eat something that you're just so craving, and then you truly enjoy it, and you're truly in that moment, oh my goodness, it's so rewarding, and it has no negative impact. Now, if you go and do that every single day, of course, but I would argue that when people eat a certain way and treat themselves like that, they don't truly feel good.
Totally. It's like understanding what's the gentle framework that we can have that help guide us in a way to be strong and healthy and live a long time. And also, how do we build in known flexibilities to be able to enjoy everything
Right.
that life brings. I know that you are also an observer of Pizza Night Friday with your family.
Pizza Fridays, it's that, I mean, is there any other way to live?
There is not. What is your go-to pizza place? Is it a
Uh,
local Colorado place?
It is. So there is a amazing place that's true, like 5-minute walk from my house called Rosenberg's. They've got great bagels, and then they have pizza at night, and it's really good. So you should go to Rosenberg's for pizza. It's fantastic. I haven't been in Boulder. Cosmos is probably the spot.
Okay.
But yeah, so I live in Colorado, so I got the Colorado bias. But if I'm choosing just one pizza
Yes.
as a Chicagoan, I am a deep dish person. That's
Okay.
very controversial, but that's what I was born
You
on.
love what you love.
I love what I love.
Yeah.
Don't make me choose Lou Malnati's pizza in Chicago. So good. There's like a debate of like which is the best pizza in Chicago, but I'm a Lou Malnati's guy. And
My parents are gonna love you so much. They're big Lou Malnati's people.
Lou Mal's is so good.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about it right now. You can get them to mail you one that's like
Yes.
frozen, and you warm it up in the oven. Not as good as fresh, but still delicious.
We'll take what we
still
can get.
delicious, right? I mean, it's better than never having Lou Malnati's since I don't live in Chicago anymore.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay, Adam, we're going to have to do a 2.0 because I have so many questions about the other elements of what you do with your media company and all of the different things.
Those are like different first hours. That was the interesting
Yes.
thing, that like the first hour of fitness was very different than the first hour of writing books,
Yes.
which is very different than the first hour of starting media companies. And I think I like that because I think it shows us that like some people feel that like an inflexibility is almost like a character flaw.
Right.
Whereas I think a flexible mindset is a growth mindset. And as we learn more and we evolve, we find out where we thrive, where we work, what we love, and what we want to do. Everyone should have the right to chase those things and do so knowing that like this is your life, right? We don't get to choose how much time we get, but we do get to choose how we spend that time. And I think if more people spent more of their time chasing what it is that they want, even if it means changing directions, a lot more people would probably find themselves happier. I sometimes look back like, well, what would have happened if I would have just stayed on the psychology route? And I don't think my life would have been bad, but I do think I wouldn't have been as happy. And I do think the person I am today would have changed because I never would have known what it would have been like to take a big chance. And a lot of us avoid those big chances because we're so afraid of what's going to happen if we trip and fall. And sometimes you need to trip and fall. My first company, I definitely tripped and fell because I had no idea. I didn't know how to write, but like when I started my first business, I didn't know how to write a business. But you realize that those falls, even like the bad ones, they're actually not that bad. You can bounce back. And it's why I love this concept in this show, because I think everyone's first hour is a little bit different. But most people's first hour is not what they thought it would be at all.
And that's why I like to learn about it and share about it, because I think it helps all of us be willing to see those mishaps that happen and be able to bounce back more quickly and learn from it in a better way. Okay, the last question that I have is something that you touched on at the beginning. You talked about happiness and how when you were first starting in your goal of writing, you just wanted to be happy and
Right.
have that be the goal. Has your definition of happiness changed throughout your career?
Definitely.
What does it look like now?
My happiness focuses much more now on how I'm able to show up for my wife and my kids, which seems like it'd be the easiest thing, but I'm a total workaholic. And for so many years, I've defined myself by, what I produce and then how what I produce affects people, right? I took a long break from writing books because I had this existential crisis where I was like, are the books I'm writing truly helping people the way that I want? Or am I just like adding to more noise? And I love writing books, but if I'm going to write something and it just adds more noise, is it really serving the purpose that I have? And the purpose that I have in terms of like happiness is I love my wife and my kids. I love spending time with them, and it's difficult. It's truly a battle for me to juggle all of it. But happiness is dependent on values. And if you don't know your values, it's worth taking time to figure those out. And my values have been the same for about a decade now. And it's people and experiences. you know, I mentioned this in the acknowledgments of that book, you know, because I believe that if you meet great people, you will have great experiences. And if you go to great experiences, you will meet great people. And I think my wife and my kids are great people. And I think the experiences I share with them are great. So my job is to make sure that I focus on that. And I'm good at, I would say, interacting with great people. I still have to work on the experience. I sometimes get too bogged down in work and trying to do everything, where I keep in touch with my friends really well, keep in touch with my family, but like, do I do everything that I can with them experientially, in person, going to do those things? And because I'm aware of that, I can keep on working on it. So I think the desire to still write great stories, make great impact, truly help people, that is a part of the happiness pie, and I think it always will be, because it fills me up. Seeing other people succeed, seeing other people have breakthroughs, seeing people do things that they didn't think they could do is a drug. It is great. It feels so good when people have a breakthrough. But if you spend all of your time doing that for anonymous people and not as much necessary for the people that you love most, yes, you're doing good, but are you applying that good to the people who probably deserve it the most? So I think the happiness factor for me is like, how do I still do that stuff that I love in work while making sure I apply that same energy, if not more, to the people who matter most to me?
Wow, that's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. I can't wait for our 2.0 version to see how it's going.
All right. I can't. Always a work in progress.
Oh, I hear you.
Always
As am I.
progress.
As am I, my friend.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. Where can people find you and all of the different things that you do?
You can on social, you can find me at Born Fitness. For my book, you can find it at can'tscrewthisup.com. And then for the Arnold Daily Newsletter, it's just arnoldspumpclub.com. And then the media company is Pen Name Consulting. So that's, you can just look up Pen Name Consulting, because it's a .co. And if I tell people, they're going to get confused. But yes, Pen Name Consulting is the media company.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Adam. You're the best.
Thanks, Kelsey.